that you make with creating music and sound, which again, if anybody out there listening, we've got John Mattox here, the creator on for what Instagram, YouTube, now Facebook,
And Facebook.
um, and it's LinkedIn, right? Isn't that also one of them or no? No.
Well, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok,
Oh yeah,
YouTube.
TikTok.
Those are the four big ones.
Those are the four big ones, and then you've started your school channel as well.
Right.
And he is with us here talking about how he does these amazing breakdowns. We're just getting to know him. So now we've gotten past the recording phase. So you're sitting around one day and you're like probably messing around with some tracks and you're like, well, this is kind of interesting. Ooh, well, that's interesting. I mean, how did you decide that, to break it down and to start explaining to somebody? Was somebody like, I don't understand how music works. What are you doing?
Well, the social, I mean, I started on TikTok with this idea that, I've got a studio, I have experience recording. I don't ever sit and think that I'm like such I don't want to say the word, a, a badass.
An arrogant bastard.
Yeah, I don't, but, I've worked with enough people and they're like, oh, how do you do that? How do you do this? And I've had some like private students and things in the past. And I just thought, well, maybe there's something I can do to, you know, take my experience and give back to the internet world, YouTube and everything that I've been taking from for so long.
Yeah.
And that's really where that started. In terms of like doing content about music production and things about Pro Tools and Logic and software, plugins, all that sort of thing. And at some point, it was Every Breath You Take was the first breakdown that I did.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen other people. There are other creators that do these sorts of things. And I just basically found certain things about that song in the recording, especially being a drummer. I had gone basically my whole life not knowing that song was a drum track that was layered in different parts. It wasn't a drum set recording like I thought it was, and I think most people do too. It's just
Well,
a very like simple Stuart Copeland performance, and honestly, not one of my favorite Police songs because it's so simple. It's like, come on, I want to
Right.
hear him do his thing.
yeah,
And-
it's no Police fan's favorite song. It
Yeah.
really isn't. I mean, honestly, you ask any Police fan, that is like their least favorite song. But
Is that
it's
true?
a huge hit, as far as I know. Everybody I know that likes the Police.
and so I just found it fascinating that they started with a drum machine kick drum, because when you see the tracks, you can kind of reverse engineer things even if you weren't there in the recording. But of course you can. I mean, I always research every track that I do to
Sure.
make sure what I think has happened, and to just get things right, because I have a lot of respect for these songs, and
Yeah.
they mean a lot. And if people are watching them, I want to get everything right. And so, yeah, they started with this kick drum track, and then they layered snare and tom together, Stuart playing a track of that. Then they added the hi-hat, and then they added the cymbals. So in other words, layer by layer, they created what sounds like a drum set performance,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. And it's just so interesting that they did that. And I thought, you know what? I bet other people would find this interesting too. And so that was the first breakdown.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, the kind of format in terms of like going between the different parts and sections was started with that one, that initial breakdown. And that's still kind of the format. I've tweaked it and, enhanced it over the past 2 years or so. But I just find like the things that I find most interesting about these songs, other people do too, because
Yeah.
I am no different than anybody else. Like, sure, I do music. I know how to make music and how to record. I have technical skills and musician skills. But at my core, I am a music lover, just like
Right.
everybody else. And especially with some of these songs that I've done, I like these songs just as much as anybody else. And I like to think that comes through a little bit, like
Yeah.
that. Like nobody's forcing me to do a breakdown. It's like I genuinely find these things fascinating and interesting how they're put together.
Yeah.
And the great thing, and as I mentioned before, the way you explain these things, you put it down to the basics, so an idiot like me can totally understand what you're talking about. And the way you break it down and the way you explain it, it's just so easy to understand. It's not like some of these guys that are, recording. I mean, there's not a lot of other people, but there's some other guys out there that kind of do similar things, and they get very technical, or they get very instrumental with it. You kind of take a little bit from everything, and you just make it so it's very well explained, and it's very knowledgeable, and it's so well, we got a clip.
Let's show it. Let's
I was
show
gonna
the
say we got one of your clips.
Okay.
Let's show what you got going on here.
Now, this cowbell track comes with a disclaimer because you may not be able to unhear it once you've heard it, and it actually sounds like a click track, and they may have used it for that as well, but it's definitely in the mix, and it's more in the background like a textural sound as opposed to a typical heavy-handed, loud, in-your-face rock cowbell. Now, there's something special about this cowbell that I haven't heard in any other song before. The pitch of the cowbell changes with the chord changes of the music. Now, they didn't do this with multiple cowbells. They took one cowbell hit, put it into a sampler, and then they programmed it to play those different pitches. And I tested this theory out with the Contact sampler. I took the same sample, put it into Contact, and recreated the part, and it was exactly the same.
Dude, right there, that is what I mean. How that was just the way you did that was, I mean, everybody's just like, oh my gosh. I mean, if you don't, you're an ignorant
Well,
bonehead.
and it's funny too because
Yeah.
the untrained ear just doesn't hear it,
Right.
right? The untrained is just like, oh, there's cowbell in the song, and it's just like, no, it's different pitch of cowbell,
And
right? And that's how they did it, and it's just like it's fascinating. It's fascinating to learn that stuff.
Well, here's the thing, and I get a lot of. I love getting comments, and fortunately, I get very few trolls and people saying negative stuff. And when I do, I deal with it. But m- people say this a lot, like I've never heard that, or I never noticed it. And
yeah.
Yeah,
this is a really good example of this like detailed work that they did. And when you listen to the song and you listen for the cowbell, it really is more in the background, especially
yeah,
when you think of cowbell, you think of the Saturday Night Live skit
right. Of
with
I
course.
was gonna say, how many
this
times did you not crack up doing that clip?
right. And the typical rock cowbell is a featured thing that's super loud in the mix, right? And
Right.
that's why that skit's funny. But I myself didn't recall that there was even a cowbell track in that song because I
Yeah,
was going through the tracks and I heard that and I'm like, oh, that sounds like the click track, because oftentimes people will, have some sort of percussion sound to keep them in time with the song as they're recording.
And they
yeah,
masked over it.
Or yeah, they don't play it,
Right.
right.
because it's just a guide for the drummer to record to. But then it changed pitch, and I was just like everybody else. I'm like, what, like, what is that? And then I listened to the song. I'm like, wow, there really is cowbell. Like, I didn't even notice that there was a cowbell in the track, and like that is such a running theme with a lot of these songs where some of the parts, they're not meant to be noticed. They're
Right.
meant
Yeah.
to be heard, because it's like the body, it's like the meat of the song. It's part of the overall sound. But if you noticed every single thing, you wouldn't be able to focus on the lead vocal, for
Right.
example. You wouldn't
Right.
be able to focus on the main part. And that's the beauty of music production. And I equate it, like you talked about big band. At some point, I realized like music production is really arranging of parts,
Yeah.
arranging of sounds, and big band, classical music especially.
Yeah.
is all about that. That's all written out, of course, but
Yeah.
when people produce music, they're essentially arranging in their head or how they feel things. And what's great about some of these stories of songs is sometimes things are meticulously thought about. Like if you take a Steely Dan, a popular Steely Dan from like Asia or
Oh my gosh.
Gaucho, where it's well known, they had everything written out and they gave it to the musician, and
Yeah.
then that was how they made music. When it comes to a lot of other music, people sometimes ask, so how does they do that? Does the musician play the part, or does the producer tell them what to do? Like, who makes, like, how does that work? And the answer is different for every single song, even
Yeah.
Right.
because sometimes the band, for instance, like one of my favorite debut records is the B-52's first record,
Oh,
Oh wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
because to me that doesn't sound like a produced record in the sense
No.
that what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It sounds like, and the first Van Halen record is a
Oh
good
man.
example of this. Like those both sound like this is what the band sounds like live. We're just gonna capture that on the recording,
Yeah.
because it doesn't sound like there's all these like hidden track, because there's not hidden tracks in a B-52 song. It's what they did at that
Yeah.
time.
It was
Yeah.
literally them in the studio right then and there. They recorded the song, boom, done. And
So yeah, so when it comes to like how do they come up with parts, obviously the B-52s had all that stuff worked out just by playing together as a band. And
Yeah.
right.
maybe one of them said, hey, can you try this or you can do that. But a band like, say, War, I did a breakdown of one of their couple of their songs, and I'm pretty sure those guys were just like jamming in the studio, playing these cool grooves, and no producer walked into their session and said, okay, you play this on guitar, you play this on bass.
Right.
Like they
Yeah.
they were just grooving and then doing this cool vocal melody on top. But their production was just being a band and playing live together, so it's different for different bands and different artists.
Yeah.
Sherry seems to be fascinated with cows and cowbells, and I do believe, yes, there was a cowbell in the "We Are American" band song. Yes,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's pretty prominent. But now, okay, and the way, like you were talking about the tone pitch on Owner of a Lonely Heart, you found the same thing going on in Tainted Love,
Exactly.
which it was
A slightly different thing, but there's those there's these little, I always thought that they were castanets
yeah,
Oh,
when
right.
I was a kid, because
Yeah.
there's the main like drum machine groove, but then there's these like these little accents.
yeah,
But until I actually kind of went through the track and was listening for it, I didn't know that changed pitch either.
Yeah.
But it does, and you again realize that whether it's the musician or the producer, someone is creating these variations or doing something to the tracks that over time they evolve and they change and they give the song momentum and like define the arrangement in sometimes real subtle ways like that, right?
Yeah.
right,
Like you
It would
never
be really
notice it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would be really amazing to be a fly on the wall in the studio when they're making that decision, and it's like maybe they have the cowbell at one pitch through the whole song. They're like, it's not really working. Like it's not really. It's like, oh well, what if we adjust it? Right. And just to be there to hear them make that decision and then realize that that's the way to go would be just incredible.
right.
And it could be because back in those days in the early 80s, before MIDI, right, before
Right.
machines could talk to each other, off especially the Moog synthesizer, the very first ones,
Oh
will
my God.
they were notorious for not staying in pitch and
Yeah.
being a little bit sort of intermittently things changing. So that little castanet part in Tainted Love, for example, that could have been just like the voltage changing in the studio or
Right.
something, and maybe they went, oh man, that changed, and then they heard it and they're like, oh, but that's cool, like
Yeah.
that happens too.
somebody fired up the blender in the studio, and
Yeah, right.
yeah. Well, and now the great thing, and you bring out a lot of this too, especially with the older songs like "In War," the 10cc. You remind people that this is analog. This is before all the digital, like with the yes, Owner of a Lonely Heart, a lot of digital control. But back in the days, they used to take pieces of tape them together, put them together, and you start talking about what excellent example. We were talking about it yesterday in pre-check. The 10cc song, "I'm Not in Love," how they put all these tracks together through different channels on the soundboard, and then use the soundboard basically as an instrument.